All right, welcome in another edition of the Good and Plenty podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Goodman, and we have a great panel today to talk about a topic that's very important to me. I think very important within college basketball. That is why there aren't more black head coaches in college basketball right now. And I'll introduce the panel today. Top left, you have Jerome Tang, who's been at Baylor as Scott Drew's right-hand man for 17 years. Is that right, Jerome?
17
years. Underneath Jerome, we have Eddie Fogler, a long time head basketball coach, Vandy, South Carolina. Eddie runs Fogler Consulting for the last how many years, Eddie, where you do search firms. You help place coaches at various jobs within college basketball. How many years have you had that?
Jeff, I'm not sure, 13, 14, or 15, somewhere in there.
You've actually done more searches, I did the numbers, than any other search firm in the country. So,
well, I also am willing to do lower level searches and take on business that way and work with the AD to make sure it's fair.
To his right, we have Peter Roby, former Northeastern athletic director. I'm not sure what you're doing now, Peter. You look good, so that means you're retired and probably on the beach somewhere.
Well, I wish. Thanks, Jeff, for having me. I'm actually been consulting with the NCAA around their leadership development programs, which I've been involved with for well over a decade and doing some senior consulting with them. So I'm actually just got back out to Indy to an apartment that I have out here for the first time since COVID hit. Flew in last night. So I was in Eddie's old neck of the woods in New Jersey and flew out here last night. And so I'll be here a week and then head back. So enjoying doing that.
Perfect. And last but not least, we have Tulsa Athletic Director Gregg, who's been at Tulsa since 2013, was at Eastern Michigan prior to that, was also a heck of a football player at Vandy. You still look like you could probably get out there, Derek. So thanks for joining us. And we'll start with you. We'll start with you, Derek, because you are an active athletic director. I think a lot of people would want to know why the numbers are what they are. And I can rattle off a bunch right now with coaches first, and I'll rattle off a few of those, which is there are 80 of 336 coaches right now, non-HBCUs. That's 24% black coaches, head coaches in Division I. And Power 5, it is 8 of 65, which happens to be the same number for athletic directors. Black athletic directors. There's only 8 Power 5 ADs that are black right now, which is, I believe, my math isn't great, but I think it's like 12%. Kind of an embarrassingly low number, Derek. I'll start with – it's not an easy question, but I'll start with the main question. Why? Why are we where we are right now?
Well, that is a hard question. And I think a lot of people are still trying to figure that out. You just rattled off a lot of interesting statistics. And our league here in the American, 6 of the 11 coaches are African-American. So I think we've taken the lead in that, in the Big East too. But some of the other Power 5 conferences, it's gone down over the years. So it's a lot of different things. I've hired lots of coaches. I've hired 15 head coaches. I've hired men's basketball, football, women's basketball. And I think one thing a lot of people don't understand is sometimes the athletic director isn't the only one making the decision. And so you have a lot of power brokers who are involved. I tend to use search firms to help because these searches in basketball are so inundating with information, and you have so much busy work and so many calls and all those things coming in. So a lot, but you have to appease your constituency. You have boosters, you have the president, you have the trustees. And I've been in those conversations when we've tried to decide who the last 2 or 3 people were going to be and had some very candid conversations. But I've always made the recommendation that I felt was right for the university. But I always understood that there was probably about 2 or 3 more levels above me sometimes in making the decision. So I think you just have to have courage, and your power brokers have to all be on the same page if you're going to go that route.
Peter, back in, I think, 2007, the numbers were a lot better. They were like 33% at one point, I think 10 years ago or so in the Power 5s. ACC had 7 black head coaches then. There's 3 now. What happened? What happened?
Well, just to pick up on what Derek said, sometimes the decisions are made at 2 or 3 levels above the athletic director, and that's where the money and the influence is. And the vast majority of the people that are in those circles are white, and they're white males. And I don't think it's a coincidence that there are as few ADs that are of color, and there's as few head coaches of color as there is, because the network is a big part of it. And it's an awareness and an understanding of why it's important to have certain people in certain roles, given who they're going to be mentoring and nurturing over the course of their career. The other thing is, I think the money was always, the money has been good for a while, but the last 10 years, the money's been exponential. And I don't think it's a coincidence there either, that as the money has gotten that much bigger, the stakes get higher and people want more influence because the money's so big, and they're afraid to quote unquote experiment with a black head coach. And so, it's not surprising to any of us that have been in the business for a long time, especially those that are black. So, money, influence, power, that typically is, the locus of control is typically white. And we're trying to continue to break through that.
Eddie, again, you've done this for a while. You've hired black head coach Mike Boynton. You hired Oklahoma State. You hired this past year. Well, I don't want to say you hired, because you were part of the search. I know. I do that. And
was that a Freudian slip there, Jeff?
You know what? Sometimes it is, because, and I think that's my question to you, Eddie, is sometimes we believe, and not just me, but a lot of people believe the search firms do the hiring. How much of that is a misnomer?
Well, Jeff, I can't speak for the other search firms. I can speak for the work I do. My approach to an athletic director is, my first question is, what's your profile? It's what you want, not what I want. Then my second question is, what's your package? Then we determine the pool out of his profile. Then there's the process. I have not picked one head coach in all the searches. Honestly, I have not. It's not my decision. My goal is to get the best candidates in front of the AD that I can say to the AD, they're all qualified under your guidance with your profile. And once 4 or 5 of those coaches get in front of the AD, I'm basically out of the equation. I've approved or signed off on those people saying they would be good choices. They're all good. Pick the one you want. And so that's kind of how I do it. I look back. I have never thought about this from my perspective. I played with Charlie Scott, 4 years with Charlie Scott, first African-American in the Big Four back from 1966 to 70. So I saw what Charlie went through. I may add on, Derek, by the way, I was just watching CNN. An African-American in Tulsa, Oklahoma is 2.3 more times likely than a white person to get arrested. Just for example, with all the stuff going on in the country. So for me, I looked at my files today. I've worked with 11 athletic directors who have hired a coach of color since I've been doing this. I'm also proud to say, by the way, not to toot my own horn, I've actually worked with 8 female ADs. And so my wife's happy about that. So it's not about color, it's about profile fit. Can I say that an athletic director, I cannot say that an athletic director has ever said to me, Eddie, I need to have a minority candidate to cover my butt here in this process.
Jerome, you've been in this a long time. You've had opportunities. You have, but you probably haven't had the opportunities that you wanted. You look at, I'll say it, you look at some of the Duke assistant coaches, and they get really good opportunities for their first jobs. They get, Marquette for Wojo. Chris Collins gets Northwestern. They're Power 5 jobs. You've been at a program that you took over probably the worst situation that we've seen in the last 20 years. I think everybody would agree with that. It is the toughest situation you guys had to take over after the Dave Bliss situation. And your top 5 this year, go to the tournament almost every year. How frustrating is it? And what answers do you want, or I guess what changes do you want to see made for Black assistant coaches and other Black head coaches getting better opportunities?
Well, I think all the guys have said that there are layers above that in areas that, you know, we don't have an opportunity to interact. And I learned this in interviewing. They said that, you know, the first thing the people you're interviewing with, they want to know, do they know you? Do they like you? Then do you understand their need? And then the fourth thing is, are you the best for the job? So if going into it, am I the best for the job is the third category they get to, I've still got hurdles to clear. Do they know me and do they like me? Whereas if Derek and I, you know, we look alike, we can get past that first hurdle pretty easy about knowing each other. But if the person looks different to me, I've got to get past that and get past them to understanding that I am easy to work with. I am someone that they can get along with. And if the people who are helping make the decision are not in the room to figure that out, then I'm already at a disadvantage. And so I think it used to be like Coach Fogler is different. Coach is and I hope you don't mind me calling you coach because you're coach to me, but Coach Fogler is a coach. There are not, most search firms, it's not a coach that's helping. You know, most athletic directors today, unlike Derek, they're not former student athletes or coaches, you know, and so somewhere along the line, Jeff, it went from looking for a head coach to looking for a CEO. The rules changed and we didn't get that information. And so now every time I listen to people talk about, if you're going to have an opportunity, you have to prove that you're a CEO. Well, for a while, I was just trying to prove that I could coach. Yeah. You know, now they're different rules. So I mean, it is frustrating. I'm blessed to have a great job, but I also believe that there are a lot of guys like myself that could have as much success, if not more, than some of our peers that we work with.
And Jeff, I'd like to interject on something that all of them said. First of all, with Coach Fogler, who I call him coach because he was a coach at Vanderbilt when I played football there. I never have had a search firm guy make a decision for me. So I want to put that out there. The athletic directors, the presidents, the board members, whoever is involved, they make those decisions. Now, you want to have a good search firm who can recommend some people because, again, they've been in it. They know people. They've had other searches where guys didn't get jobs, but they did a good job where they were. So you want to collaborate with them. But you don't want them to come in with a stable of people and say, here are your candidates. I think some people think that happens, but that doesn't happen with me. Back with what Peter said, the money is important. And the bigger that the money's gotten, the less patience that people have for you to produce some success. So I think guys get washed out sometimes unfairly. I look at people like, I can't figure out why John Thompson III hasn't gotten a job with what he did at Georgetown. Mike Anderson was pushed out of Arkansas after having some success there and had been there. And I worked with Mike when I was there back when we were with Nolan. Tubby Smith gets fired at Minnesota the day after he takes a team to the NCAA tournament. So some of those things happen. I don't think that the patience is there. And then getting back to what Coach Tang just said, what a lot of people don't realize too in some of these cultures and some of these environments, if one of the decision makers like myself, who you mentioned that the numbers are low, is in the room already, then sometimes you look at it and say, can this institution really fathom having a Black athletic director and a Black head coach at the same time? So those are things that are really, really issues in this business.
Yeah. Do you feel pressure at all to try to hire another Black head coach, or are you just looking at it, hey, best candidate? I mean, does it kind of go in the back of your head that, hey, listen, we don't have a lot of because you hired Frank Haith.
Correct.
And again, was that in your mind of, hey, listen, if there's somebody close, I'm going to give an opportunity to a Black head coach? Frank had already obviously been a head coach at that point.
Right. Well, I want to make sure that the pool is fair. Yeah. And that it's got some equity in it and some racial diversity in it, first and foremost, and try to put together search committees or advisory committees that are across the board that have some diversity as well. But at the end of the day, all these searches are different too. So as Coach Fogler will tell you, or anybody who's been involved with these, and Peter as an AD, sometimes you offer the jobs to people who don't take it.
Right.
And you end up working your way back to somebody else who may have been second or third. And so you have to deal with the, and media guys like yourself, Jeff, who are high, rating the hire and all those things. A lot of people don't know exactly what happened, and they don't know how you got from A to Z. But all that's, going to be scrutinized. So you're taking the best information you're having at the time. You're sitting down with somebody, you're staking your career, your reputation on somebody that you talk to for a couple of hours, and then you move ahead and you try to support that person. So the more that I talk about this, the crazier that I sound for being in this business for so long.
Peter, how do we make sure that, I guess, the process is more favorable in terms of the pool? Again, Eddie, I know kind of brings, as a search firm, you bring that pool to you, but you're seeing it right now in the NFL. They're trying to come up with creative ways that I'm not sure I completely agree with, but I feel like whatever can be done to make it more equitable, I think that's obviously a positive. What can we do in the college ranks to make sure that it's fair?
Well, the first thing is, don't let the finalist pool always have just one black person in it. There's no rule that says it only has to be one. So that's the first thing. Second thing is hire more black athletic directors. I mean, the network is important. The appreciation of what people can bring to a job, the folks that see themselves and others may feel like they have exactly what I'm looking for because I see myself in that person. I was there once myself. I know what it's like to have to overcome certain obstacles, or I love their perspective because I can see them mentoring our athletes. There's only a little over 30% of all black males that go to college graduate. So that number is, it's mind-boggling. So the more that we can put people in positions that can mentor and be a role model for those young men, the better. That doesn't mean that we're going to discriminate against white candidates. The issue is that the more people making decisions that look like the candidates, the more often they're going to end up at least having a better chance of getting the job. That doesn't mean they're going to get hired, but they're going to have as fair an opportunity as we might hope for in that situation. So, we're talking about hiring black coaches, but in the reality, ADs and presidents, if they were black, there may be more receptive to the idea. And we know that there's very few black chancellors and presidents of universities. There's very few black chairs of boards of universities. And so it's an ongoing process.
So is that the only way it's going to change? I mean, really change is if we get more black presidents, more black chancellors to hire more black ADs, who in turn hire more. I mean, it shouldn't be. Let's be honest.
No, it shouldn't be. But I would rather that be the reason, and not because there's riots in the streets. I don't want people hiring somebody black because they're trying to keep their students from rioting. What the hell? That's not the reason to do it. You should be doing it because you think this person not only is really qualified, but they'll be a great role model for the people on your campus. One of the things that I would always say, when I was the head coach at Harvard, I wasn't just excited about being the head coach at Harvard because I was excited for the black students at Harvard. I was actually excited for the white students at Harvard because I wanted them to see a black man in a position of authority. I wanted to see them see a black person lead so that when they got into the world, it wouldn't be something that was a foreign concept to them. When they had a black boss, they wouldn't freak out because they had seen somebody in leadership that was black. So that's the other thing that I think we miss when we don't take the opportunity to see blacks in positions of leadership. Everybody loses in that situation, not just the kids of color.
Jeff, this is Eddie. The numbers don't add up. I mean, I was going to say what Peter said. How many African-American or presidents or chancellors of color are there? How many people of color are the head of the board of trust? One of the first questions after I work with an AD, I'll ask, who's making this decision? Is there a committee? Who else is involved? How can I help you? In my view, this ought to be as much your decision as anybody else's. I try to get the political sense, perhaps, of what is going on. The numbers don't add up. Something isn't right in terms of African-American coaches, coaches of color being head coaches. You look at back in the old day, and I would like for, Peter, your thought, by the way, Tommy Amaker and Coach Jones at Yale, two great coaches, African-American black coaches in the Ivy now. But, back in the old day, you had John Thompson, you had Nolan Richardson, you had John Cheney. Yeah, and some other really prominent African-American coaches doing extremely well. Today, it's not quite the oomph to it, the power to it. I don't know if that would be helpful. I think Leonard obviously has done such a great job at Florida State over so many years, but he's so behind the scenes. He's not the kind of the personality who wants to be out there to some degree. The other thing that's happening here is for African-American coaches is, there's one black coach in the Big Ten. He's a graduate of Michigan, Juwan Howard. Memphis hires Penny Hardaway. Pat Ewing at Georgetown. That seems to have been kind of the new avenue, but how many times is that going to happen? Vanderbilt does hire Jerry Stackhouse. Those are pro players with big names. I think Jerome sitting there is wondering, Eddie, how does an African-American assistant coach get the opportunity? And boy, that's really, really tough, because it's tough for any assistant coach, I think, Jerome, to become a head coach, because there's so many assistant coaches and who want to become head coaches. And how do you distinguish which one? That's tough for an athletic director, and even tough for a consultant to kind of say which assistant coach is going to be the next great head coach. And the last thing I'll say on this go around for me, I want to give kudos to Craig Pintons. Craig Pintons is the athletic director at Loyola Marymount. I've not met Craig. I worked with Craig this spring on his hiring of Stan Johnson, the assistant coach at Marquette. And I didn't realize this to the end of the search. He never brought up to me one time, Eddie, I'm looking to have a pool, a diverse pool perhaps. He never mentioned diversity, never mentioned anything. Craig Pintons' final five coaches, the final five in the pool were all African-American coaches that were left standing to get into the final interview process. So I want to give a shout out to Craig Pintons. It was never discussed, never talked about it. It just happened that the best five candidates, in his opinion, with my guidance, were five African-American coaches.
Hey, Jeff, Greg, Derek, can I ask you about your time at Vanderbilt? Because I've watched Vanderbilt from a distance, and they've had two African-American football coaches in a row. African-American athletic director, now female. You've had Jerry Stackhouse, but the chief of police is African-American. What is it about the culture at Vanderbilt that people can learn from, that can be spread, because they've been super successful?
Well, I think, and I've been connected to the institution since I went there in the late 80s and early 90s. And I think the administration has just been progressive. And they've been open-minded. And you mentioned the fact that they've had two athletic directors who are black in a row, two black football coaches. The only other place that I can think of that's ever done that is Eastern Michigan University, where I was. And it wasn't two in a row. I thought Gene Smith was the AD there a long time ago. I was AD there. And then he hired Ron Cooper while he was there, and I hired Ron English while I was there. And it's just never happened. So you have to have an administration that's open-minded, progressive. I think Vanderbilt prides itself as being a little bit different in the SEC academically and a lot of other things. And so that's part of it. I was going to ask you a question too. I know, Jeff, it's your interview, but I want to ask.
Go, guys. Listen, the best interview is if I stay out of it and you guys.
Well, Coach, I know you've had, and this is what I run into also. Sometimes guys like Coach, and I want you to speak to this, you have a better job where you are now than becoming a head coach, maybe going somewhere and becoming unsuccessful and getting washed out. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's absolutely right. The money that we make some of us make as assistants is ridiculous. But my wife and I, we started a long time ago living our life at a budget that was way below what I made, because I saw what happened to some other assistant coaches, that they couldn't afford to take the head coaching job. It was just too much of a pay cut. So that wasn't an issue for me. I'll tell you, I've been on 4 interviews, and all the committees, on all of the committees, there were no African Americans sitting in the room with me. Okay, and so that was one of them. It was just the athletic director and myself. The rest had committees, but there was no one that looked like me sitting in the room. And then with the one opportunity that I was offered, I was not allowed to bring my own staff. I had to keep everybody else that was there from the last coach that got fired. And so you want a chance to be successful. That didn't give me, in my opinion, give me a chance to be successful.
Right.
And so it was better for me to stay where I'm at. And so it's not, I want to be a head coach, but I want to be a head coach at the right place that I can go. Cause I've never been a mover. I was a high school coach at the same spot for 10 years. I've been at Baylor for 17. I'm not a guy who just wants to bounce around and, take the next, whatever is supposed to be hot. I like building things. And so for me, that's been the way I made my decisions.
Eddie, you mentioned Big John Thompson, Nolan Richardson, John Chaney. We don't have that. We don't. I mean, that is a big factor, I think, right now, is we don't have that big voice that has done it at the highest level, number one, and also maybe that big voice that is unafraid to put themselves out there. It's obviously a lot easier to do it when you've been successful at the highest. Well, here's my take. Why aren't Coach K? Why aren't Calipari? Why do we have to wait for black head coaches right now to come out and say that there need to be more black head coaches? Why can't the best white coaches come out and do that? And why haven't they? And I'm not throwing at you, Eddie. I'm just saying.
No, well, Jeff, to me, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm pretty much retired, and I watch a lot of news and I keep up with what's going on in the world. It's a societal problem. I mean, I don't want to get into politics here, but look what's going on in our country. And we could get into, that's not what we're having this call. So it's part of society, unfortunately, I think. And the numbers don't add up. It's not right. The thing else that could help it as much as a lot of things we've talked here today, for African-American coaches to have success, for an African-American coach to get to the Final Four, to the more successful head coaches are who are coaches of color, that will help. I think too, if I may kind of move into another area, it would be, and I'd be interested to know Jerome's take on this as an assistant coach. To me, it is incumbent upon a head coach, whether it's Roy Williams, Coach K, or Leonard Hamilton, to prepare their assistant coaches to be able to become successful head coaches. I mean, it's not an easy job. It's not for everybody. Some people have it, is what I say. Some people have it, the ability to move over that one seat and be really good at it. They've got it innately, but they've been trained properly. They've been given the experience. They've been pushed to become better. So I think that's part of the equation too, for head coaches to take it a responsibility to help assistant coaches be ready. But it's also then, I think, incumbent on assistant coaches to go up to Coach Drew Jerome and say, I want more responsibilities. I want to get in this area, coach. I want to learn more about this. I want this, whatever, more scouting on court. I want to get more involved with the offense. So when you do get your chance, you are ready to be the best head coach you can be. So I think that also needs to be addressed. Head coaches need to take more responsibility.
Hey, Jerome, before you respond to that, Jeff, let me just say that Ed, he named off some of the most iconic coaches in basketball, white or black. But one of the things about that is that those people had time to build the program. So, they were at their respective programs for a long time, and they built it over time. They created a culture. They got the recruiting base set up. They got the alumni involved. Nowadays, if you can't win in 2 years, you're going to get fired. And so how are you, for a lot of the black assistant coaches, first-time head coaches, everybody had to have their first job, and you're going to, no matter how long you've been an assistant coach, there's an adjustment period that comes. Many times, as Jerome has highlighted, you're not necessarily going to go get the pick of the litter when you get the opportunity. So, you go from a Power 5 associate head coach position, and because those things are so far, few and far between, and the issues that we've been talking about, you're going to probably maybe have to take a job that's really a struggle. You got to build it back up. So are they going to give you time to do that? Are they going to allow you the time to recruit 4 and 5 classes of athletes and students before the thing really starts to get percolating? And what happens is all the pressure to win right away makes people do crazy things. Right. And expectations impact behavior. And so if we're not going to be patient and let people get in there and settle in and learn their culture, meet the alumni, go get out into the recruiting and get the right fit for that particular school, it's just going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy every time. So, Jerome, I'm sorry to step on that, but I just had to say that.
No, that was really good. And to Coach Fogler's point, you're right. It is on the head coaches to prepare assistants. And, and I can only speak for our situation, but Paul Mills had the most success at Oral Roberts anybody's had in 5 years as the head coach there. Grant McCaslin won Conference Coach of the Year at North Texas. Matt Driscoll won his 3rd Conference Coach of the Year at North Florida. So Coach Drew does a great job of preparing. We had the number 4 defense in the country this year, and we switched from zone to man, and I'm responsible for the defense. So, there's no doubt that Coach Drew prepares his assistants to have the opportunity. It's the other 3 guys that I named, they just a little different complexion than I am. And so, but we all worked in the same system and did the same things. So, and to coach, to Peter's point that, coaches aren't given enough time. Why the black Bryce Drew got fired after a couple of years, but nobody is given enough time anymore. We got the job at Baylor. They sat us down and said, you don't have to win it all for 8 years. Just don't break a rule. And so we were able to really take our time and build the thing. And what happens is, like, a 5-year contract is really only a 3-year contract, because if you get to your 3rd year and you haven't won yet, it kills you in recruiting if you only have 2 years left, because really all you have is 1 year left, because people don't mind buying out that 5th year. And so if there's not an extension after 3 years to make sure you have 4 years onto that, it's not going in the right direction, so, and I understand, Derek saying, there are people above him saying, man, Chris Beard turned it around in 3 years. Matt Rule turned it around in 3 years in football at Baylor. Then that makes everybody else feel like they have to do it that fast. And so it would turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy. But to say that African-American coaches have to have success and that it helps others, well, of the 32 conferences, 2 of them don't have a black head coach in it. So we'll take them out of the equation. Of the other 30 conferences, 10 of the coaches of the year in that conference were African-American. So that's a third of them, but that's not the percentage of guys who are head coaches right now. So it's not a matter of success. And, one thing I respect about Coach Thompson, Coach Chaney, and Coach Richardson, they didn't wait till they won a national championship or had success before they spoke out. They spoke out early. Right now, the money is so big that I feel, Jeff, I agree with you that the guys are afraid to talk because it's their livelihood.
And I'd like to interject on those coaches, because I work with Coach Richardson at Arkansas and got a chance to go to his Hall of Fame inductions the last time I actually saw him, where he came to Tulsa for another event. So, but not only were they successful, they were big voices. And they also had the backing of the Black Coaches Association, which I think is a huge void in the business now. It's a necessity. We have had other organizations that have been involved, but I remember being at the BCA convention. I was really young in the business. It was about 1990. It was the year Tubby Smith won the national championship at Kentucky. So it was back in the 90s.
Okay.
I'd only been an administrator for a couple of years. And just the atmosphere it was about 300 or 400 people in this room. And when Tubby walked in the room, everybody got up and gave the guy a standing ovation. And it still gives me chill bumps to this day. And I had never even seen Tubby, in person. And that was the first time I got to meet him. So when you have those iconic guys like that who basically haven't been replaced and there's no organization behind the entire movement, there's a void there.
Yeah, I think Conzo Martin's a guy that I respect everything he says. He's about the right things. He's unafraid. Obviously, he came from East St. Louis. There's no BS with him. But again, Conzo Martin's name just doesn't resonate, right? He hasn't won at that highest level that everybody will look at Conzo Martin's name and what he says and say, oh my God, I gotta listen to that. That's reserved for Kay and Cal and Roy and some of those other guys. Even Chris Beard now has probably moved in closer to that realm, which I don't understand why Scott Drew hasn't. But that's for another day.
Well, it is and it isn't for another day, because what's going on right now is emblematic of the same thing you're talking about. If one of the things that I've been hearing from a lot of the conversations that I've been on since the George Floyd thing is how tired Black people are about this issue. And we're tired, we're worn out right now because everybody's calling us wanting to know what they can do. And we're trying to be advocates, we're trying to provide guidance, but you can only answer so many emails, you can only read so many emails where people are unburdening themselves. It's a burden. And if it's gonna, it's not gonna. Gregg Popovich in his comments today or yesterday said, "This isn't for the Black society to fix; it's for the white society to fix. If you're going to end systemic racism, if you're going to reform social justice and law enforcement, white America is going to have to do that, not Black America. We've been talking about this stuff for over 300 years." So all I'm saying is that these issues like you're talking about, it's not for Conzo Martin to fix it. It's for the rest of society. It's for the presidents, the chancellors, the commissioners, the athletic directors, the chairs of boards. Those people have to decide that the time is now, enough is enough, and they got to fix it.
But the big voices are who? Again, Kay, Calipari. Those are the guys that when they speak, I think people listen. And I think if they spoke right now and made this something, again, you've got almost 60% of assistant coaches right now in the country are Black. Like Eddie said, the numbers just don't add up. I mean, they don't add up. I'm polling right now. I'm going through and I'm polling in every league in America. I'm polling at least 20 assistant coaches. Jerome knows this, on their top 3 assistants in each league, because I feel like at least it's going to give some notoriety to some coaches, especially at the lower levels that haven't been able to get it. Maybe it'll help. Maybe it won't. Whether it's Black coaches, white coaches at those levels, I just think it's very hard for people to know who the really good ones are. And this isn't a perfect situation, but it's a better one than ESPN's top 40 under 40, which was throwing darts, in my opinion. So I think ultimately you're talking about the big boys having to step up, and not just coaches, but again, people like me in the media, people like Eddie in search firms. All the search firms are white for the most part. And I think it's you're right. It's up to us, because it's not going to change without us. It's not. Whether Conzo Martin talks, whether it was Big John right now or Nolan, I mean, they're still around. They can still talk. But I'm with you. I think that's a part of it. I think ultimately it's going to have to be more of the high-level people that make that change.
So is the next podcast you're having with those guys on then?
Yeah, I don't think so. Cal and I don't really talk, and Kay, I think after this whole Zion thing, has probably gone into a little bit of a cocoon between us.
Don't make excuses for him. Invite him to come on.
I'll invite him. Listen. Right. I've invited him to some other things. He has not shown up, so the invite will be there.
I'm just going to hold you. I'm going to hold you accountable.
No. I'll absolutely invite them. I think, again, I think it's a necessity that everybody kind of does their part here and isn't just, talking the talk. I think that's my biggest concern. I'm sure if it's mine, it's got to be you guys, right? It's got to be you guys.
You're preaching to the choir, brother.
I can hear it from you, Peter. I can hear the level of skepticism on your part, and I don't blame you. I don't blame you because I'm the same way. I'm thinking in a month, in a year, like, let's hope we don't, I don't think we'll forget, but again, you've got to sustain this. You've got to sustain what's going on right now and make change rather than just talk about it. That's what I had you guys on for, is how do we.
Let me give you an example of one of the things that happened a number of years ago, and everybody thought it was a seminal moment, and that's when Lovie Smith and Tony Dungy were in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So they had two black coaches that were going to play in the Super Bowl, the first time ever, and one of them was going to win. It was going to be the first black head coach to win. And how much has things changed since then? I got called when I think I was at Sport and Society, or I was at Northeastern as an AD, and they wanted to talk to me about what I thought that meant, and would it allow more black young kids to see themselves as coaches and go to coach. I said, no, there's plenty of assistant coaches that are black. We don't need any more inspiration. The place where this should resonate is with the owners.
Yes.
Because the owners now should see you can hire a man that's black to lead a bunch of players and they can have success. That's where the significance in my mind was, not the aspiring coaches. It was the owners, so that they could get comfortable with the notion that a black man could lead an organization like that to the ultimate success. But it hasn't really kind of resulted in the number that probably should be, given the number of black players there are in the NFL.
Eddie, is there something else that a guy like Jerome can do to, I mean, people call me all the time coaches, and they're like, what can we do? And I always tell them, well, you know what, if you're going out and recruiting in South Carolina, call Eddie Fogler. Try to get to know him, because that's why you're getting all the calls, Eddie.
Well,
blame me.
I've met Jerome, but not on a tournament, at a basketball game. No, I looked at Jerome's bio before we came on. I already knew most of it just to double check. And, thing I would say about, obviously, what Baylor's done is terrific. I did not realize, which also should help Jerome, is the success of the other assistant coaches from Baylor who have gone on to become good head coaches. The one thing I think pigeonholes Jerome a little bit, if I might look at it from a consultant view here, from an athletic director thought, was his whole career has been in the state of Texas. So it's probably likely that Jerome would get an opportunity in the state of Texas, Oklahoma, somewhere in his geographical fit. Now, I'm not saying that's right or fair, but many times an athletic director, part of the profile is, the geographical piece in terms of where the coach has been. But certainly the background, his experience at Baylor, and the success, again, of the assistant coaches, I would like to think Jerome would have an opportunity to become a head coach, in the not too distant future.
That's I agree with you, but it, like, Scott Drew was from Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, there's exceptions to, and I understand that. There's always, I got you. I'm just saying sometimes the profile, from the athletic director, I don't make the profile. That's not what I do.
Do you think at all, is there any correlation to the fact that the numbers did start to drop when search firms really, really did enter the picture? And if you look at it, there is a I mean, whether it's there or not, I don't know what the reasons are, but if you look back, and when search firms became more prominent in college basketball, the numbers have definitely steadily dropped.
Well, Jeff, I don't know. I can only speak for myself. And again, I did not know. I looked at the searches I was involved with. I had no idea how many coaches of color, African-American coaches, wound up getting the position. From my perspective, I was in college coaching for 30 years, and some of my best friends in college coaching today are African-American coaches. And that's who I am. That's my background. I mean, I'd like to go back to George Floyd and basically say to white America, where have you been? Did it take us to see, white America to see an African American man murdered on television for white America to wake up. Now we'll see how white America follows through in terms of not only the social issues, but I think it's just part of athletics as well. It's society, and so we'll see what follows through. I don't want to bring gun violence. I thought guns were going to be changing gun laws when we had the elementary school killings in Connecticut. I mean,
Yeah.
And Jeff, I'd like to interject on that too. And I commend Coach for running searches that have diversity and leading to guys get hired. And I want to go back to what Peter said. It does have something to do with who's in the room too.
Sure.
And so I've hired, like I said, 15 head coaches in various sports. I've hired 2 African-American men's basketball coaches, an African-American women's basketball coach, an African-American football coach. The one that really riled everybody up is I hired an African-American baseball coach at Eastern Michigan. So, and he was only the second one in Division 1A at the time. But at the end of the day, you have to look at yourself, look at how you're doing things. And I think out of those 15 people, I think I hired 5 white males, 5 black males, and 5 women. But that's because of who I am. And so I wouldn't put it on the search firm because, again, the people who are making the hires still, they're paying the search firm. So the search firm works for the school, or so I thought. And I think Coach would back that up. And so you just have to make the right decisions.
So how much is it with you, Derek and Peter, when you were hiring? You alluded to this right off the bat, that sometimes it's not really your decision. Is that more often than not, or are you guys making the decision more than, yes, you are?
No, nobody's making a decision but me.
You're making okay.
Yeah, we had a process where we had people involved in a search, committee. We had student athletes involved when it was a head coach. We had the faculty athletic rep. We had other coaches and staff. So we tried to get a broad representation of people on a committee that would interview folks. But ultimately, that's the job of an athletic director to hire staff. And if we had sports supervisors involved in those sports, we would let them kind of get out in front and do a lot of the early work because that's part of their development as well. And then we'd sit down and review resumes and get down to a shorter list, maybe do some Zoom calls first and then whittle that down and get people on campus. But the ultimate decision for those kinds of things is the head coach. One of the reasons that it's important is because that person that's leading the athletic department is embedding and sustaining a certain culture. And so you have to pick people that are going to help you to achieve the kind of culture that you want, that's going to put student athletes first, that's going to, make sure you balance athletics and academics and all the other things that you're trying to get people to represent in terms of your values. So if you're not making those choices, then you should maybe move on. I would never let the president or the chair of any board make the decision, because at that point I know I'm in the wrong spot and I got to get out of there if they're not going to let me do my job.
Right, and I've had it both ways. I think in being able to have independent control, that's fantastic. In some of the other situations that I've been in, I understood that my job was to heavily influence and make strong suggestions and recommendations based on me being the one who knows more about athletics than anybody in the room. And I think I had a level of influence with those people who helped make the decision. So I've done it both ways.
Hey guys, I've worked on searches where I had to personally fly in, talk to 10 academic people to kind of go through what the process would be with the AD. Then the candidates would come in, interview with that committee. Then they would interview with me and the AD separately. I've done that, been part of that. I've also been part of the following. Well, Derek, who's making the decision? And Derek goes to Eddie, me. And I go, that's the best answer. I said, how many people involved in this search besides you, Derek? Me, Eddie. I go, Derek, that's the best answer. Because to me, that's the way to go if you can, if an athletic director has enough juice or clout to where he's going to make it and keep the president involved, I think, too, in the background. And maybe the president wants to meet the final one or two, perhaps. But I've seen big committees, and I've seen, from my experience, just the athletic director and myself with the president in the background being part of it. But I'll tell you one other. I've had a search where at the 12th hour, the president came in, overruled the AD, and picked the guy he wanted. The last hour.
Last go around here. Jerome, how confident are you that this gets better, that this changes?
Good question, Jeff.
Man, that is a great question. Well, I think I'm an optimist by nature.
Well, you work with Scott Drew. You have to be an optimist by nature.
Well, yeah, I have to help be a pessimist for him though. But I have to balance it. So, but optimistically, I feel like maybe there's some momentum, and there's a lot of things playing into it. And the fact that there's no distractions right now because of COVID, we could really focus in on making some changes. I think we have to have more athletic directors, but before you can have athletic directors, you have to have more associate athletic directors that are African American. And I think for us as coaches, we have to look at our guys in the eyes and tell them, look, you're not going to go to the NBA. You're not going to here's another direction where you can really impact not just your life and your family's life, but you can impact other people's lives and get more of our athletes involved in athletic administration and internships and those type of things. And so, but at the end of the day, this is a finance thing right there. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and there are multi-million-dollar people who are pulling the purse strings, and they have to change for it to change underneath that.
Peter, what do we have to do? What do we have to do, whether it's me, whether it's Eddie, whoever it is? What do we have to do to impact change?
Well, from a media perspective, I think, the media has to keep the pressure on the powers that be to justify why they're hiring the people they're hiring, or why aren't more people getting opportunities. That goes right from Mark Emmert at the NCAA to the boards of directors of Division I, the board of directors of the three divisions, the board of governors, the board of directors. College presidents need to hear that there are really quality people out there that are Black that deserve an opportunity, that are more than qualified. So the media can make some waves in terms of making sure people know what's going on. And then, one of the things that I've been committed to over the last more than a decade, involved in leadership development with the NCAA, is creating pipelines of qualified people that are going to aspire to be athletic directors. So we started this conversation talking about Candace Lee. Candace is in our Pathway program. She's one of our members of the cohort that I've had a privilege to work with this year. And, I couldn't imagine anybody being more qualified than Candace Lee. 19 years at the same institution, former student athlete, so qualified academically, a person of great character and value. So, we're trying to continue funding programs through NCAA programming to level the playing field, to get the pipeline more full of qualified candidates of color. So that's my commitment. I'm going to continue to try to do that and make sure people are qualified to be athletic directors. And in return, hopefully they'll be more aware and more committed to those values, and they'll hire more people of color.
Derek, what have you kind of heard from your colleagues, right? Your white colleagues, athletic directors. Has this been different over the last couple of weeks?
It has been different. I think there's a new level, a sense of urgency right now. So what people of color like myself say is, we need those allies. And especially on the athletic director side, the presidents, the big time coaches that you've mentioned. So right now, I'm the chair of our conference's racial equality action group. And we call it action group because we have to have some action behind these things. So it's definitely time in this time now in history to certainly stop talking about a lot of the things. We made a lot of statements, but we have to have some action. We have to have some real power behind it, and we have to have some allies. And I think if that thing comes together, because we have the coaches out there, we have one of them on here with us right now. I can think of a few other guys I can rattle their names off of, but so they're in the pipeline, they're ready. I appreciate what Peter's been doing, because I've always participated in those leadership programs since their inception with the NCAA coaches academies and all those things, trying to train guys up and tell them what guys like me are looking for. But the time is now to get everybody on the same page and move forward.
Eddie, I'll leave with this, just because we didn't touch on this throughout, but the fact you were a coach, so you know this isn't true, but it is true, and that Black assistant coaches are deemed recruiters, right? How do we change that? It's been going on forever, hasn't it? Back to when you were a head coach, and how do we change that?
Well, that's a stigma that's been around quite a while. Basically it's an insult, Jeff. How do we change that? I would say that it goes back to the assistant coach himself and the head coach. There needs to be a teamwork involved, where we're not going to be able to change certain people, what they say from the outside, but what we can change, I think, from the inside is for the head coaches to push assistant coaches to become great assistant coaches, prepare them to be successful. And assistant coaches, again, have the responsibility to push their head coach for more responsibilities. There's an office. I would like to think right now Jerome is watching tape of some of the NBA stuff, trying to become a better coach, watching his game tape, maybe watching Gonzaga play, trying to become better in your profession, self-awareness. The media, I'm not sure, how that's going to work. You go to a basketball practice, and many times I go to a lot of practices, you don't see sometimes white coaches, and many times probably more African-American coaches very involved in the process. I think, again, going back, we've had African-American coaches be successful, but I think part of it would be hopefully the Mike Boytons of the world, the young assistant coaches who are coming up through the pipeline, can have great success in others. And then going back to more athletic directors of color, certainly helps, as Jerome has talked about. And Peter, we got to get people up the food chain to become more successful and more numbers. The numbers don't add up.
Well, listen, I told you guys I keep it to an hour. We're at 59 minutes, so I'm gonna let you guys go. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this was it was certainly helpful for me.